How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a special video today, I would say, because I'm not insane.
I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane?
This could be a masterpiece, and I believe that we do have a masterpiece on our hands, a potential one to kind of, reshape some of the stale, ideas in survival horror that we've had for a long time now. And it's not really surprising because the Silent Hill 2 remake was absolutely fantastic by Blooper. I think some people were worried because they thought they would change so much of that game, which made it so groundbreaking for the time and thought-provoking. There's a lot of deep philosophical themes in that game around loss and human suffering. Great stuff, stuff that we all can appreciate, I'm sure.
I was God once.
Yes, I saw. You were doing well until everyone died.
It was awful.
And this time they've gone for something completely different, something truly unique. And I just think that this is, personally speaking, this speaks to me, okay? Personally speaking, this just fits the themes that I love so much. And sorry about that. What the hell's going on there? It reminds me of some, of my favorite movies, like The 12 Monkeys. If you know, you know. That movie's all about time travel and, like a dystopian future where humanity has just become, truly horrific. And they do all of these experiments just to simply try and send someone back in time to stop a, terrible event from taking place. And this kind of deals with a lot of those themes. It's about a dark future where things have gone bad for humanity. It's your job to go back in time, extract information from certain people, certain consciousness, and to try and stop this from taking place and stuff like that. And I just really love the themes that it deals with. It has a very unique art style. It reminds me of The Last of Us, mixed with Annihilation, which is a great movie, by the way. You should check it out. With kind of Stranger Things, but with much more of a futuristic, clunky, tactile, hard sci-fi stuff that I really like. A little bit of Alien in there. So it really does capture what I'm looking for in a survival horror game. And at times, yes, it does kind of remind me of Dead Space. Gameplay-wise, this is a very different beast. Much more slower, much more tactical, even more deliberate, I would say, than Dead Space. And I know, Dead Space 1 and 2, the OGs are deliberate, but this has such cool ideas, and that's what I wanted to discuss today. So I do hope you enjoy this Cronos, the New Dawn review, this Cronos review. And do bear in mind that this is all from the early access stuff, only stuff that I can talk about from hands-on and the preview events and stuff like that, so I can't go into everything, but I do hope you enjoy this early look at Cronos, the New Dawn.
Let's go already!
So I'm going to go into the positives and negatives like I do with all of my early access reviews, and then you can decide if this game is worth it or not, if Cronos the New Dawn is worth playing or not in your eyes. I think that's much better than doing a simple, number, which doesn't tell you anything. And I do hope that if you're new here, that you subscribe, become a wise one today. That's what this channel is all about, creating a community of intellectual gamers. Yes, I know, a rare thing indeed. So if you love deep analysis on video games, video essays, and philosophical content on the real world, I do those videos and also blend them with gaming. And then for the kind of more casual content, the early reviews is where I go over new games like this one. So subscribe if you're new, join this community. It really does mean absolutely everything to me. I'm really trying super hard to go full time with this channel. So your support would help a lot. Consider hyping the video. It's free and it does help boost the video. It's a new feature that YouTube put out and it does really help a lot. Or just supporting me by becoming a member or dropping a donation or simply checking out my music on Spotify. All of that would be great, but just having you here as a subscriber does mean a great deal to me. So thank you for watching, and I do hope you're having a blessed day. Let's get on with the video. So the first positive that I want to get into is, of course, the art style, okay? And I have already kind of mentioned that, to be honest, but it is just absolutely breathtaking, okay? This is exactly what I've been looking for, something that blends all of these different, sci-fi ideas together. And I love hard futuristic sci-fi. That's why I'm a passionate Fallout fan. Big clunky technology, and you can tell that that's exactly what's going on here with his spacesuit. And it's not exactly a spacesuit; it's more of like a Stranger Things device where it's to keep him safe in these environments. So I just love the art style. The only thing that I'm not a particular fan of, I would say, is the enemy designs, okay? Because they do feel a little bit generic at times. I think it would be so much better if we were fighting more, interesting monsters instead of generic, mutated humans, but it does make sense within the narrative. Now, the enemies in this game are called orphans, and it explains a lot why so many of them are a little bit fucked up.
Wormtail!
My lord.
And basically, this is all to stop the change from happening in the future and, this kind of widespread calamity that basically has, changed humans into this genetic goop that all merge together. And that is the big gameplay feature of Cronos, okay? So it's very different compared to other survival horror games where it's more about, managing your ammo, managing your inventory, managing your space within the world, because usually you move slower and you're more clunky. It has all of those things, inventory management, it's very tight, but this time around ammo is a big deal. You can't just, run and gun, and I always feel, especially when I play games like this, that I'm super conservative with ammo, and it's kind of annoying because in the end there's actually more ammo than I need. But this game truly does actually capture that, kind of rationing mindset that I have, and I really like that because you really do only have like a couple of magazines at most, and it is difficult to find ammo in this game, so I really like that. But it has a different element. It's not just, fighting different enemy types, okay? Cronos the New Dawn has this interesting idea where it experiments with, the dead, okay, and corpses. And you might think, this is kind of generic stuff. The Last of Us or Fallout, we've all seen this where ghouls are lying on the floor, or, clickers look like they're dead, but they're not actually dead, and it's a fake out. But this isn't a fake out. They are basically dead, okay? They are no threat to you, but they become a threat to you because they can get merged with other creatures, and then this animates them, and it doesn't just animate them, it makes them more hostile, it makes them, kind of level up in the evolution sense, and they become more dangerous to you. And this is a big thing. They've designed this whole game around that kind of mechanic, and it's super cool because, it's all about managing your space between them. It's up close and personal, but it's with weapons, not melee. So you really do have to think where you're stepping, where you're going, if you're going to backtrack, how many, corpses are in that room, because if you bring an enemy to the other corpses, this will cause a lot of problems. So it's management not just of your weapons, your inventory, but of the actual space itself. And that's something I haven't seen in many horror games. That's why I think this could be a masterpiece, because it's playing with different ideas. And that's exactly what I want from gaming. Creativity back again. So you really need to pick your targets. There's different points where you can shoot them. There's no dismemberment exactly like not Dishonored, I mean Dead Space. You can do a stamp attack, but it's not really that useful, just to finish them off and stuff like that. It's more about, giving yourself time to react, like shooting their leg to get, some time to backtrack, or to reload and stuff like that. And also there's this kind of canister mechanic. Basically you have canisters, okay, and these act as AoE flame attacks. They are easily damaged by fire, so this is a big thing. And this also eradicates all of the corpses around you. So if you do that, you're in a much safer spot, because then the other corpses around you can't be, merged or reanimated or anything like that. But also, if you're in a kind of boss fight or you're fighting a bigger enemy, this can also be very useful. So it's all about managing that as well, and different body parts to give yourself time. So I really like that, and that is the first major positive. It's just playing with new ideas, new mechanics that I haven't seen in other horror games. Now the next thing I want to talk about is how this is this is going to piss off some of my audience, because I've recently been comparing a lot of games to Souls. And yes, I am a massive Dark Souls fan. There's no denying that. I absolutely love it, but I also hate the meme of comparing everything to Souls. And no, this is not a Souls-like, okay? So just calm down a second. This is not a Souls-like, don't worry. But what I mean by it has so many elements of Souls, and the reason I loved the original Dark Souls before it became what it is now, it's because it borrows some of the same aspects that made that game so special. So let me just say, the HUD, for example, is pretty much non-existent, okay? It also doesn't pause when you're interacting with, managing your items and stuff like that. So this adds urgency, which I really like. There's no like easy way just to, stop and pause the gameplay. Then also, there's the element of surprise, okay? Dark Souls, if you've ever played it, you know that basically there's always enemies waiting to ambush you around every corner, and it always adds to that feeling of tension because you never know when you're going to come across something. Cronos does exactly that because there's areas where you think it's going to be safe, where you think it's just kind of a puzzle area, and you're here to get some loot and stuff like that, but actually then it can easily turn into a combat situation depending on how you play. And also there's a lot of ambushes set up, so there's always this element of surprise that I really like. Also, the same thing with music. There is a lack of music in this game, which is very, very nice in a way because it makes you super pulled into this atmosphere that they've created, this heavy, clunky atmosphere where everything sounds so sticky and moist. But I just like the lack of music, the tension built in, and the same thing with the checkpoints. There are ways to save your game, and it's kind of tropey in that way where, there's vendors where you level up and, get, ammo and stuff like that. You can upgrade your inventory, get better damage, all that stuff, and that's a little bit tropey at times, but the save point system doesn't just feel like a checkpoint like you would get in Dead Space or something like that. It feels much more akin to the bonfire because there's so much tension and this game is difficult that, you're always looking for that next, safe area, that kind of respite. So that's why it feels more like bonfires to me, and it just has lots of those elements that really make it, tense when you're exploring, and when you finally get some relief, it makes it even more satisfying, and that's quite rare and important to a survival horror game, in my opinion. And the story to me is super interesting. It does have some nice environmental storytelling as well. Kind of like a Bethesda game, I guess you could say. Not to the same degree, but there are notes littered around where you can interact with them. But I just wish there were more audio logs because, I know it doesn't matter for the sense of realism if it's a note or an audio log, in my opinion, because who has time to write a whole goddamn diary explaining their deepest, most inner thoughts in, the situation and then they just die after? It's quite unrealistic, but that's a good story device in gaming. But I think having some other interaction where it feels a little bit more alive, like an audio log, adds more to the world, especially when it's such a mystery and you're wanting to know more about the world. It'd be nice to see more of that, or have, like a television screen come on, through like the time dimensional slip or something, and have some story dealt that way. Basically, how the story is done in this is through notes. There are the occasional audio log as well, and basically you will be in contact with your commander, who is basically, in charge of you going back and, finding these key targets. And he's very cryptic. Just the world itself is very interesting, and I really hope they do something unique with the story. Like I said, I can't speak about the end game stuff, but there are moments of, this interesting just exploration gameplay where you come across time rifts and, you get some respite from all of the combat and stuff like that. Also, there are puzzles in Kronos the New Dawn. And honestly, I think it's pretty cool because I love anything that plays around with time in video games. It's super interesting, but sadly, the time puzzles here are a little bit generic so far, anyway, because it's mostly like, repair a bridge that was broken. Now you can walk up this thing, or now it's an elevator, or use this and build yourself a bridge or something, or access a different room, you know. And I would like to see more interesting time gameplay. I love when Dishonored, I think it was Dishonored 2, had that kind of time mirror, and you could literally hop back and forth in the same level between different time and take down enemies and then go back into the future and then like hop back in time and then take down another enemy. Like that shit was insane. More games need to play around with those ideas, in my opinion. So the next positive in this Cronos The New Dawn review is simply just the atmosphere. This game is scary, okay? And although I don't find the monsters themselves to be super scary, it's more so the world and the atmosphere and, you know, what's actually happened to humanity that's quite terrifying. In a similar way, you know, it is exploring the wasteland in Fallout. It can sometimes be unsettling, but the actual horror elements, it doesn't rely too much on cheap jump scares and stuff like that. It's more, you know, building dread through your own actions. And that's super cool, because when you realize you've messed up and you lead an enemy to another corpse that's then going to merge with that enemy, and then maybe you panic and backtrack and then you lead it into a bunch of other enemies, and then, you know, you haven't got enough ammo to deal with the situation, that's when you know you've messed up, and that's where it's scary. Also, you know, you are heavy in your movement, your melee attacks don't seem to do much damage, maybe it's upgradable later on, but you can still kite the enemies, you know, they are slow moving, so it does give you some control. There is no dodging mechanic, it's all very weighty and deliberate, and it's all about actual, you know, skill. There are headshots, that is how you get off the main damage. There are power charges, so you need to power up your weapons to give them, you know, the biggest kick possible. So it's all about timing and your own skill level, and that's quite refreshing, honestly, where it's not artificially bloated or, you know, like, where it's not artificially difficult, it's actually based around skill. There are some collectibles as well to find out throughout the world and stuff like that, so you have to keep your eye out. I've only really seen like a few negatives really so far from the early access stuff, and there's like some texture pop-in, FPS being a little bit stuttery at times, but nothing crazy bad. But I just love the world building in this, you know, it makes you curious, and there are things to interact with in the environment that don't necessarily add anything, but adds to the world building. And that's the greatest strength, is just the atmosphere of this world. The combat, you know, we've seen it before. It's classic third person, you know, slow shooting, but the tactics of it all is what makes it feel quite different compared to other third person shooters, and it is much more about management than it is just going in there and just, you know, getting rid of the enemies with as much ammo as you could want. So there is a lot to think about, especially with the merging enemies. I just hope that that evolves throughout the game. There's new enemy types, and it's not always exactly the same thing where, you know, you're just kind of avoiding these areas where there's lots of corpses and stuff like that, because that mechanic is so cool, but I just hope that it continues to be interesting with the full experience as well. But you can expect, you know, different enemy types. You know, there are, you know, the more brutish big ones, the more kind of nimble ones that have like a long range attacks, stuff that like little creatures that will blow up if you get too close to them and stuff like that. So there is a variation here. I just hope that, you know, it has a little bit more going on when it comes to exploration, because it is very tightly designed. There are side paths, but they all kind of loop back on each other, and apparently it's going to be a lot bigger in some of the open sections later on. But it's not open world, it is hub based, you know, these big open levels until you get to your target. But I just find the story interesting, the world is interesting, and it's not too hand-holdy. There are some, you know, like boxes with clear yellow markers on them and stuff like that, but honestly, I think what they're doing here is quite unique. As long as they keep introducing new ideas and environments change enough, I think Cronos The New Dawn could be something very special. So that is my Cronos The New Dawn review, my Cronos review based on the early access stuff. I do hope you enjoyed this one. Please let me know what you think about this game and survival horror games in general. If you're new, subscribe, like I said, that would be very, very appreciated, and it would be an honor to have you. Have a great day, look out for yourselves, look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
What do you see? Giant. Sleeping. Again. Animals. Fighting.